This is Nick with logosbynick.com, and in today's tutorial I'll be demonstrating how you can design this business card in Inkscape, and I'm going to show you how to design it in such a way that it'll be formatted and ready for print, meaning you can upload it directly to a site like Vistaprint or Gotprint or any other online print service, and it'll be optimized to print at the best quality and highest resolution possible. And to do that you need to understand bleed lines and DPI, which I'll be briefly touching on in this video. So I'll go ahead and minimize this and we'll get started here in Inkscape. This is going to be the view when we first open the page. By the way, if you'd like to know how you can make Inkscape appear darkened with these custom icons, I'll have a link to that information in the description of the video. So the first thing we want to do is set up our document, because in order to prepare a file that we're going to send over for print, it needs to be set at specific parameters. So here in the US, the standard business card size is 3.5 inches wide by 2 inches high. So I'm going to set up the document for those parameters. So I'm going to go to File, Document Properties. But the thing is, when you have something printed, there needs to be a bleed area added to the file, which I'll be explaining briefly in a minute. So instead of it being 3.5 inches by 2 inches, we're going to add a 1/4 inch bleed, meaning most print shops require like a 1/4 inch bleed. So what that means is you add a 1/4 inch to each dimension, both the width and the height. So I'm going to change the units to inches. And instead of making the width 3.5, I'm going to add a 1/4 inch to that and make it 3.75. Oops, 3.75. And for the height, instead of making that 2 inches, I'm going to make that 2.25, since we're adding a 1/4 inch bleed. And I'm going to leave on the show page border. I'm going to turn on border on top of drawing, and I'm going to turn off the border shadow. We don't need that. And then I'll close out of this, and I'm going to press 1 on the keyboard to zoom into 100%. And you'll see we have a 3.75 by 2.25 page border set up. So let's open up the Align and Distribute menu with this button up top. And from this drop down, we're going to select Page. We normally do Last Selected, but for this one we're going to use Page briefly. And then we'll open up the Edit Objects, Colors, Gradients, and Stroke menu. So the first thing we want to do is create a white background for this document, because that's what the color of this design is. It's a white background. And despite the fact that the actual canvas appears to be white, it's technically transparent. There's no color there at all. It's just defaulting to white. So let's grab the Squares and Rectangles tool, and I'm just going to roughly draw a rectangle about that size. And I'm going to turn that white. You know what? I'm just going to leave that black for now. I'll turn that white in a second. And let's go back to the Select tool, and let's change this to fit this page border. So we'll come up here to the width and height, and I'm going to change this drop down to inches. And I'm going to make this the same width and height as the page, which is 3.75, and I'm going to hit Tab on the keyboard to skip over to the height, and hit 2.25, and hit Enter. And I'm going to center it on the vertical and horizontal axis, and it should be fitting in there perfectly, since that's how we set up our page document, 3.75, 2.25. What I'll do now is I'll turn this white, and I'll just convert this to a path quickly. I'll just go to Path, Object to Path. And what we want to do now is set up our bleed. So to set up the bleed, what I'm going to do is, well, you know what, first let's open up the Layers menu. We'll click on the View Layers, and you'll see right here, Layer 1, this is the layer we're currently working on. I'm going to turn on this lock icon to lock that layer for now so we can't edit that. And I'm going to add a new layer with this button that says Create New Layer. And I'm just going to title this layer Bleed Reference. It doesn't matter what you title it. The name, whatever characters you put in here, that's just for our reference. It won't affect anything within Inkscape based on what you name it. And I'll just click Add above the current. And so now we're working in the bleed reference, so that should be highlighted. And I'm going to create another rectangle. I'm just going to click and drag and create a rectangle. I'm going to click this X to give it no fill, to turn off the fill. And I'm going to give this a red outline by holding Shift and clicking on the color red. And then I'll come over to the Stroke Style tab, and I'll give this a stroke width of 0.5. And then I'll go back to the Select tool, and right here where it says Effect, make sure you have this button to the far left turned off for what we're about to do next. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make this bleed line the same width and height that the actual business card will be after print, which is 3.5 by 2 inches. So I'll come back up here, I'll change this to 3.5, I'll hit tab to skip over to height, and I'll make that 2. Hit enter, and I'll come down to the align and distribute panel, and I'll center it on the vertical and horizontal axis. And let me come back up to the layers menu, and I want to lock the bleed reference layer. I'm going to lock that, and then I'll unlock the layer 1 layer. And then we can close out of that for now. We'll come back to that at the end. And what you'll see now is we have our page set up. Let me show you what that did. I'm going to create just an object here real quick. Something like that. And if you notice, let me bring the opacity all the way up. If you notice, everything when I created this object is going above the white layer, but it's staying beneath the red line. And we want it to stay beneath that red line because we're going to have to use that for a reference. And let me just explain the bleed line real quick. When a print shop prints something out, you don't send them the file at exactly the same size. You send it a little larger, meaning everything within this red border is going to be what gets cut off after print. So ideally, you want to make sure your design extends to outside of that red line all the way into this page border. And all of the important information like names and logos and contact information is kept safely within this red border. And there's actually something else called the safe area, which is like another 1/4 inch margin. It goes inward inside of here, but I don't really like to set up guides for that. I could just, with something like that, you could pretty much just eyeball it. Like for example, if you create, like, let's say like this circle is useful information that you need. If you put that all the way to the edge like that, like right next to that red line, there's a chance that the printer might cut off some of that. So the safe area is just to make sure like you keep it like you keep some padding there between the object and the red line. So now that we have that out of the way, let's get to the design. So the first thing I'm going to create on the design are the black segments right here. So to do that, I'll just click on the white rectangle. I'll duplicate that by hitting Control D, and I'll make that black. I'm actually going to use 90% gray. I'll use 90% gray. And I'll click on this a second time to get the rotation handles, and I'll hold Control and take this top arrow in the center and just slide that to the right 1 step like that. And then I'll just hold Control and move this over here off to the right about that far. And that's pretty good. Maybe, let me just reference my thumbnail here. It's about a little less than halfway through, so maybe about this far. That's pretty good. And then I'll click on the white rectangle, and I'll hit Control D on the keyboard to duplicate that. And I'll hold Shift and click on the black object and go to Path, Intersection. And then I'll take this black object, I'll duplicate that by hitting Control D, and I'll flip this vertically and horizontally. Then I'll hold Control and just click and drag this off to the left, maybe all the way out to here. So we end up with something like that right there. And again, everything that's within this red border is going to be what the printer cuts off. So everything within this red border is going to be the actual business card. So keep that in mind when designing this. So we have about that much of that black area within that red border. I'm just going to move that over a little bit. That's pretty good. And what I'll do now is I'll click on the white object, the white rectangle. I'll hit Control D to duplicate that. And I'll hold Shift and click on the black object to the left and go to Path, Intersection. And click off of that to deselect. I'm actually going to bring this black area in a little bit. It's taking up a little too much space. So I'll just go to the Edit Paths by Nodes tool. I'll click on the black object and then just click and drag over those 2 nodes on the left and just hold Control and move those to the right. Maybe about that far. That's pretty good. Then I'll go back to the Select tool. The next step is I'm going to create this little blue stripe going over the top and appearing to go like underneath the black area. So to do that, I'll just grab the Squares and Rectangles tool, and I'll just click and drag to create a rectangle going over it like that. I'm going to change the color of that with the color picker down here. I'm going to use this light shade of blue. Then I'll come up to the Fill tab, and under the HSL tab, I'll just slide this to the right, this H row. I'll slide this to the right a little bit to make that a different shade, something like that. That's pretty good. And to convert that to a path, we'll go to Path, Object to Path. Go back to the Select tool. Maybe I'll make that a little shorter. Put that right about there. And then I want to click on this button right here that says Align Right Sides, and just go ahead and click that, and that's going to put that on the right edge of the page. And then what I'll do is I'll take this black object, click on that, hit Control D to duplicate that, And I'll flip that vertically, flip that horizontally, and just hold Control and just move this off to the left about this far. And then hold Shift and click on the blue object and go to Path Difference. So we have that blue stripe now. What I'm going to create next is this little dark blue object going to the bottom left of it. So I'm going to zoom in on this. I'm going to press plus on the keyboard a few times to zoom in. Oops. Zoom in. And I'm going to grab the Bezier pen, which is over here. Or you can just press B on the keyboard. And I'll turn on the Snap to Cusp Nodes. And I'll snap the cursor onto this bottom left corner and click. And hold Control and bring this line down to the right like that until it's going into the black area. And then click again. And then we can let go of Control. And I'm just going to bring this line up through here. And then up through here. And then back to the starting point. I'll grab the Select tool. We could turn off the Snap to Cusp Nodes. We don't need that. And I'm going to press, I'm going to grab the dropper, which is over here. I'm just going to press F7 to grab it. And I'm just going to make this the same shade of blue that is. I'll get rid of the outline by holding Shift. And I'm going to have to come over here all the way back to the left of the colors. Hold Shift and click on the X. And under the Fill tab, I'm going to come over to this L row and slide this to the left a little bit to make this darker, like that. Then I'll go back to the Select tool. I'll lower this one step and then another step. And then it should go beneath there like that. And press 1 on the keyboard to zoom out to 100% and click off of that to deselect. So we have this part set up. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start putting in this information right here. The name, the position, and all the contact info. I'm just going to enter that in real quick. And I'm going to zoom in a few more times. Press plus on the keyboard a few times. It's probably a good idea to stay zoomed in while you're doing this because 3 inches by 2 inches isn't really very big. So I'll grab the text tool, click on the canvas. I'm just going to turn on the caps lock and write my own name there. First, last. I'm just going to write that there. And this is already bold. I have it bold by default, so I'm just going to make this not bold. I'll highlight that and turn off the bold. And I'm going to create some more text as the position. I'll grab the text tool, click on the canvas. Position title. And I can turn off the caps lock. I'll go to the Select tool and I'm going to hold Control and just scale this down about that much. Put this to the left edge. And you know what? We can go to the Align menu and put that back at last selected. And then we could take this object, hold Shift, and then click on this object and align the left edges like that. And click off it to deselect. And I'm just going to move that up a little bit, holding Control while I'm clicking and dragging to lock it onto that vertical axis. And I'll go back to the text tool and I'm going to click this button over here that says spacing between letters. I'm just going to hold up that arrow until it spaces it out a little nicely like that. And I want to make sure that this is the same width as the first last name here. So I'll go to the Select tool. I'll click on the name, right click that and go to Copy. And then I'll click on Position Title, turn on the lock icon, and then go to Edit. We're going to Edit, Paste Size, and Paste Width. And then I could hold Shift and click on the name, align the left edges again, click off of it to deselect, and I'll just take this and put this up here a little bit, move that up, and click and drag over both of those and group them together. And then hold Shift and click on this blue stripe and center it on the horizontal axis. And then click off of it to deselect everything. So I'll take this text object over here and I'll just hold Control and Shift and scale that in. And I'll just hold Control and move this to the right, maybe over here. Maybe I'll scale that down a little more. And again, keep in mind this safe area right here. If you put this too close to the red line, there's a chance that the printer may cut part of that off because the printer isn't always 100% precise with where it cuts. So sometimes there's a little bit of there's like a margin error for each cut. So it's better to just keep some kind of padding between that and the bleed line. So I think right there, that's pretty good. And I'll make that white, move that over a bit. And then I'll just put some contact info on here. Usually there'll be more contact info than this. I just put the phone number and the email and the website. So I'm going to grab the text tool, click on the canvas, and for the phone number, I just, something like that. Hit enter to skip down one line, name at website.com, and then the website address, which would be website.com. And I'll go back to the select tool. I'll hold Control and Shift and scale this down. And I'll put this on in the black area over here. I'll turn that white. And maybe I'll scale that up a little bit. You can just hold Control and just grab one of those arrows to scale it. And I'll put this over here. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to include some contact icons in here. I'm just going to import these icons into Inkscape. If you'd like to use these icons, I created a whole set of these contact icons. I'll put a link to it in the description. Just go ahead. It's a link to my website. I designed the icons. You could download them there, save them to your computer, and use them whenever you want for whatever you want. And once you have them downloaded, if you want to use them, we'll go to File, Import, and it should be called contacticons.svg. And let me just press 1 on the keyboard to zoom back out to 100%. And here you see all these different contact icons right here. So I'm just going to ungroup that. Click off of that to deselect. And for this one, I used the phone number, email, and the website. So I'm just going to take this icon, the phone one. Then I'll take the email icon, and then I'll take the website icon. And then I'll just click and drag over the rest of those and just delete those to get those out of there. And let me zoom back in, again pressing plus on the keyboard. I'll put these next to each other. I'm going to click and drag over all 3 of those and make sure they're centered on the vertical axis. And then make vertical gaps between objects equal. I'm just going to make them red for now. Then I'll hold Control and Shift and scale them down about that small until they look like they match up with the contact info here. Scale that down about that much. Then we can turn those white and group them together. And then hold Shift and click on the contact info. Just make sure it's centered on the horizontal axis, and then click off of it to deselect everything. I'll just move this over to the left a little bit. You know what? I'm going to hold Shift and click on the name and align the left edges like that, so they're lined up nicely on that vertical axis, and click off of it to deselect. And I'm actually going to click on these icons and ungroup them. And click off of that to deselect. I'm just going to move this envelope up a little more. It's creating the illusion that they're not evenly spaced out, which is bugging me. So that's pretty good how it is. And if you notice, I put like a little blue stripe in there as well. So to do that, I'm just going to grab the squares and rectangles tool, and I'm just going to click and drag and create a little blue stripe going in there. Well, it's going to be white for now, maybe about that thick, like that. Whoops. That's pretty good like that. Grab the select tool, put this in the center. Grab the dropper, which is right here. We can just press F7 on the keyboard and fill that in. Grab the select tool, hold Shift, click on the name. Make sure it's centered on the horizontal axis, and then hold Shift and click on the envelope. And then come over here and click the button that says Make Horizontal Gaps Between Objects Equal. And that'll make sure that the line is evenly spaced out between the icons and the contact info. And then we can press 1 on the keyboard. Actually, no, I'm just going to zoom out a couple of times by pressing minus on the keyboard. Click off of that to deselect. And the next step would be to create a little makeshift logo here. So you could put any logo here you want. It could be your own or your client's logo or whatever. I'm just going to create a circle, circles and ellipses tool, hold Control and Shift, click and drag to create a perfectly round circle like that. Go back to the select tool. I'll hold Shift and click on the white object and make sure it's centered on the horizontal axis. Click off of it to deselect. And I'm going to create a little star to put in there because that's what I did. I put a star in there. Stars and Polygons tool, which is right here. And for this, I want the star selected. I want 5 corners, spoke ratio 0.375, and rounded and randomized both set to 0. And then I'll just hold Control and Shift and click and drag to create a star like that. I'll make that dark gray like the rest of this is. Go back to the select tool, click on it again to get the rotation handles. And I'll just rotate this around until it's sitting upright. I'll put it in the center of the circle there. I'll hold Shift and then click on the blue circle. Center it on the vertical and horizontal axis. Click off it to deselect everything. Click on just the star and hold Control and Shift and scale that down. Maybe I'll hold Control and move that up a little bit. It's technically centered, but it's creating the illusion that it's not. And that's pretty good like that. And then finally, I just put some logo text in there. So I'll grab the text tool and click on the canvas and just write logo text. And I'll make this all the same shade of gray that the rest of this is. But I'm going to make the word logo that shade of blue. So to do that, I'm going to grab the select tool. I'm going to click on that blue circle, and I'm going to come down here to the fill tab. And whatever number that is, I'm going to highlight that number and hit Control-C to copy that. And then I'll go back to the text, click on that. Then go back to the text tool and click and drag over the word logo. And I'll just paste the color into there. Hit Control-V to paste it. And hit Enter. And there we have two different colored words. Let me go back to the select tool. I'm going to put this over here. I'm going to hold Control and Shift to scale this down. Maybe I'll scale this up a little bit, like that. And then I'll hold Shift and click on the blue circle. Make sure it's centered on the vertical axis. Then I'll hold Shift and click on the black star and group them all together. And then just hold Control and Shift and scale this down, maybe about that much. Put this right here. I'm going to hold Shift and click on the white background. Make sure it's centered on the horizontal axis. Then I'll press 1 on the keyboard to zoom back out to 100% and click off of the graphic to deselect everything. So now we're done with the design. The design is completed. We want to finalize it and send it off to the printer. So what we have to do now is we have to get rid of this bleed line, because this bleed line, that's just for our reference. The print shop doesn't actually need that. The print shop will know where to cut. If you send this design with that bleed line on there, part of it will be on the design that gets printed out, which you don't want. So let's open up the layers menu again, which is up here, the view layers. And I'm going to click on the bleed reference layer and unlock it. And then I'll take that red line and I'll just press delete on the keyboard to get rid of it. And in fact, we could just delete that entire layer by clicking this minus button, delete this current layer, and then close out of the layers menu. And another step we have to take before we save this file is we have to convert the text to paths. Let me zoom in on this and explain this a little bit. As it stands right now, this is recognized as a text object in the design software. If we were to send this file off to the printers, if they didn't have this font installed, this text would appear differently. It would default into whatever default text they're using. So print shops will always tell you, make sure the text is converted to curves first, which is, that's Illustrator speak for paths. So in Inkscape, they're called paths. So I'm just going to click on the text and go to Path, Object to Path. And that's now a vector object. That's no longer a text object. It's just a plain vector object. It's no longer linked to a font file, and its appearance is not dependent on the link to that font file. And a good way to test to see, to make sure if you did that, you just go to the Edit Paths by Nodes tool and hover the cursor over each letter. And if each letter highlights red like that, you'll know that it's been converted to a path. Like over here, I didn't convert this yet. Nothing's happening to this text. So let me go back to the Select tool. I'm going to click on that, convert that to a path. Go to Path, Object to Path. Click on the contact info. Path, Object to Path, and go back to the Edit Paths by Nodes tool and just make sure, yep, looks like this is all paths, so we're all set to go. We'll go back to the Select tool, press 1 on the keyboard to zoom back out to 100%, and now we can save this file in a format that's ready for print. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go to File, Save As, and I'm just going to save it to my desktop. I'm going to title it Business Card, and we want to save it as a PDF, because that's the format that's universally accepted by print shops. Usually you can always have a PDF printed with pretty much any print shop. So we're going to save it as a PDF, and we're going to click Save. And make sure you have all of these options set as you do here, as you see here on my screen. Especially here, resolution for rasterization, DPI. You want this set at 350 DPI. The default in Inkscape is 90, but when you're sending something off for print shops usually require something to be at least 300 DPI, sometimes at 350. I just like to use 350 to be safe. And I'll just use 350, click OK, and that should save it. And then I can minimize Inkscape, and you can see here I have the business card file. It's all set. It's all ready to go. You can take this file and you can upload it to Vistaprint or GotPrint or any other online print service, and it should appear with 100% clarity. So everything should work out fine, assuming you followed all of the steps in the tutorial. So That pretty much does it for designing print-ready business cards with Inkscape. So if you have any questions, let me know. And as always, thank you for watching.